Welcome, Winthrop. This is the May 5th, 2020 Town Council meeting. It is being held remotely by Zoom. It's being broadcast on WCAT Channel 22 live at the present time, and it will be reshown during the week. We have a call-in number for anyone who would like to participate in public comment tonight. That call-in number is 646-558-8656. After you're connected, you would have to enter into an ID number, and that ID number is 879-8016-0669. If you did not get those numbers, they are on the town website. Also on the town website is a click-in where you can join by clicking in rather than calling. So please feel free to join us for this town meeting. We want it to be completely transparent, and everybody that calls in or asks to be heard during public comment will be heard. Okay, I will now call the meeting to order. And I would ask you to all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. And I would ask Richard Farino to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Richard, are you on?
He's muted. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all. Now, would you also please remain standing for a moment of silence? We have lost 11 members of the Winthrop community to this dreaded COVID disease. This pandemic has taken 11 lives. Fortunately, as of today, we have only had 2 new cases at all. That's the lowest we've had since the beginning. And it's finally great to report that the people that are in recovery, there are more than the people that are in quarantine. So things are doing good. Thank you to everyone who is following all the protocols of social distancing and wearing masks in any store or in any groups. All right, a moment of silence, please. Thank you very much. Denise, would you please call, and I seem to be lost here. Denise, would you please call the roll?
Yep, Council Ruggiero.
Here.
Council Flockhart. She's here. Council DeMarco. Council Christopher.
Yeah.
Council Honan.
Here.
Council Freno.
Here.
Council Conti.
Present.
Vice President Lettieri.
Yeah.
President Corey.
Here.
Thank you.
Can I have a motion to approve the minutes of the April 21st, 2020 meeting?
Motion.
Motion's been made by Councilor Ruggiero. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, by Councilor Farino, I believe that was. Any discussion on the minutes? Any amendments to the minutes? Any adjustments? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. No, let's take a roll call, Denise.
Council Ruggiero.
Yes.
Council Flockhart. Council DeMarco. Council Christopher.
Yeah.
Council Honan.
Yes.
Council Freno.
Yes.
Council Conti.
Yes.
Vice President Lettieri.
Yes.
President Boncory.
Yes,
Thank you.
motion passed. We're fortunate tonight to have a guest with us, and that guest is Dr. Michael Goodman. Dr. Goodman is a professor at University of Massachusetts in Dartmouth. He's an economic sociologist, and he's a 3-time past president of the New England Economic Partnership. He has been asked to join us today by Austin and Anna to give us a slide presentation. Dr. Goodman, are you ready?
I am ready, sir. Thank you for having me. So I'll offer you some brief thoughts on where we stand economically here in Massachusetts and nationally in what's a pretty extraordinary time. I think we're all living through it. I'm pleased to hear that conditions seem to be improving in Winthrop. Let's hope that that can be a broader trend that allows us to get back to normal sooner rather than later. But for the time being, we're living in what you might call a state of suspended animation. If you'll permit a medical analogy, if you put someone into a medically induced coma, it's a very dramatic thing to do, but you only do that when the alternative would be worse. And I think that's where we are right now, in a situation where we're paying a very high economic price for the appropriate public health policies that have been put in place to slow the pace of the pandemic and avoid overwhelming our healthcare system. But if we weren't to do it, or if we were to return to normal more quickly than the data think is wise, we would have a worse outcome, I think. So it's something to keep in mind as I'm going through. I think wrapping our heads around the way in which this pandemic is affecting our economy involves looking at a couple of different moving parts. As you all know, the containment measures themselves, which have restricted our movement and closed businesses and slowed business activity pretty dramatically, are right in front of our face. But before the pandemic hit our shores, it was already starting to have a negative impact on our economy through the global supply chain. Our businesses here in Massachusetts and across the nation depend in important ways on international trade. And it's not just buying a product that you might buy at a store, an end-use product, but many of our high-tech and advanced manufacturing businesses have partnerships around the world where components and inputs to their products are imported and then put into the vaunted mass high technology economy, producing products that I think have helped to make Massachusetts a pretty prosperous place, relatively speaking, for the last couple of generations. So we felt that early on, certainly as early as late fall and into the early months of this year, before most of us started to notice. And then what's happened in the wake of those appropriate responses to this pandemic has been a dramatic loss of confidence and extreme impacts on certain segments of the business community. And I'll talk a little more about that briefly. We've never really seen data like this before. The scale of the job losses is quite literally off the charts. This chart manages to capture it. It's national data, which shows we have had over 30 million American workers apply for unemployment insurance in the past 5 or 6 weeks. Here in Massachusetts, it's just over 800,000, which is an astounding number when you consider the size of our labor force. That's just about 1 in 4 workers in Massachusetts having filed a claim with the state for unemployment in recent weeks. That is something we've never experienced before, even in the Great Depression. And so this is an extraordinary time. If we take a step back, this is national data at what the future holds. Certainly April, May, and June of this year, the second quarter of 2020, certainly looking like it may be the worst economic performance in the history of the Republic, which is dramatic, needless to say. The federal scorekeepers in Washington, the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office, in their latest forecast, which is used to help set the federal budget and make spending decisions, predicts that we could see an outright shrinking of the economic pie in the United States by about 12% during the second quarter. That's a rate of decline that's approaching 40%. And so this is going to be a heck of a spring. I think, and the pain and the displacement that we're already seeing, unfortunately, is likely to continue at least for the next several months. The real wild card here for all of us is how long is this going to last? And frankly, that's more a medical and an epidemiological question as it is an economic question. What you're looking at here is not a prediction of the future, I want to be clear, but rather a model that's been developed by the UK Imperial College, where they're trying to figure out how to return to normal in a safe way, anticipating returning waves of the virus in future seasons, such as next fall, as soon as next fall. Even if we get past it in the spring and the summer, previous experience and the latest science suggests we could be facing it again in the fall, absent a treatment that works, and ideally a vaccine. Those things, we may get lucky, and those things may develop in record time, but if not, we're gonna have to be prepared to return to some semblance of normal, but governed by the conditions of the virus itself. And so they're talking about triggering distancing based on certain thresholds. When they start to see cases rising and the models start to predict the hospitals being overwhelmed, they'll reimpose the distancing. I think there's a growing consensus in the scientific community and in the policymaking community that more testing would make it a lot easier to relax distancing, because it would allow us to target the distancing and the restrictions to those areas where there appeared to be the biggest problem. All of this is designed to minimize the loss of life, to preserve our economic competitiveness, which does not benefit from deaths and illness by any means, and also to position us for as rapid a recovery as possible. I think it's hard to see us doing that without more widespread testing. In the absence of the will to do that at the federal level, I think it's going to happen at the state level, and individual businesses, particularly larger businesses, will make those moves. I just think it's going to take a lot longer that way, which I think is unfortunate, as every week or month that goes by is obviously associated with a lot of economic pain. What does this mean for Winthrop beyond the obvious public health threat? Well, I mean, I think the biggest threat to be thinking about as you stare down the barrel of a very difficult FY21 is going to be the pressure on the state budget. This here shows that obviously today's news, breaking news this afternoon, was that the April revenue report for the Commonwealth was in, and it was down 50% as compared to the same month last year. Now, the one caveat, that we've delayed in Massachusetts the due date for your state taxes. And so a bunch of bills that would have been paid this month will get paid later in the year. So a bunch of that decline is due to that timing. But we saw sales tax decline by 23%. And so I think this is the beginning of a very difficult revenue season for state government, for obvious reasons. If you're not working, you're not paying income tax. If you're getting unemployment insurance, maybe you're paying a little, but not as much as you did. If you're not allowed to shop, or don't have the income to shop, or are too nervous about losing your job to shop, you spend less. And of course, we rely in Massachusetts on capital gains tax revenues. Some of our fortunate neighbors who have large portfolios pay taxes on those when they distribute them, and our leading financial services businesses employ people who they will pay performance-based bonuses to during good years. When in bad years, when those folks don't get their bonuses or take their profits, we suffer pretty disproportionately on the state tax revenue side. And so this is a perfect storm in the sense that we're going to be hit in all the major areas where we acquire revenue at the state level at exactly the same time that the demand for state services and supports is rising. This chart here shows a national projection of the increase in the utilization of Medicaid, or as we call it here in Massachusetts, Mass Health. That's public income eligible, except for some elders and children, health insurance. When fewer people are working, fewer people are covered by their employers, and more people are covered by the state. That those are payments that we can't avoid making. So they crowd out all the other things in the budget that we all care about, including, but certainly not limited to, local aid. So we have been managing our finances in a relatively prudent way at the state level in the last several years. As you can see here, the stabilization fund, or the reserve, some call it the rainy day fund, is a buffer against these downturns in the business cycle, or these, in this case, a national disaster or international disaster. We've got as high a balance in that account presently as we've ever had, just under $3.5 billion. Unfortunately, given the scale of this pandemic and its economic consequences, I don't think that's going to be enough for us to avoid cuts, both because of the scale of the impact and because of the expected duration of the consequences. Briefly, Moody's Investor Service and Moody's research arm do fiscal stress tests for the state. Hey, what would happen if we had a rather dramatic downturn? What would that mean? And they do that really to provide information to those people who buy state and municipal bonds to make sure they know what they're getting into. And so more recently, they took a look at the impact of the COVID-19 epidemic on state finances, and they used two scenarios. So this first chart in the upper left shows their best case or baseline scenario in green, which shows a pretty dramatic drop-off in 2020 that lasts through the end of the calendar year, and then a very slow, at least a year or two, period of recovery to get back to normal. That seems optimistic. The severe recession, again, seems more consistent with the data that we're seeing, which is a bigger downturn than any of us, I don't think any of us lived through the Great Depression, so much bigger in absolute terms and impact than what we experienced 10 years ago, which we used to call the Great Recession. I think we're going to have to rename that one. What does this mean for the bottom line? So under the severe recession, the last row of that table at the bottom, it suggests a tax revenue shortfall in the next 12 to 18 months of just under $3.7 billion, another $1 billion in additional new Medicaid spending, and just about a $4.7 billion fiscal shock or gap. We have that 3.4 or 3.5 billion in reserve, but other expenses are going to go up too. So it's going to be a very, very difficult FY21 for the state, and I think by extension for cities and towns, which the local aid line is obviously a large line in the budget, and history suggests that when the Commonwealth suffers, so do all of the most dependent stakeholders in the state budget, including, I'll add with some sadness, the public university. I do think the federal government has been helping, but we're going to need more help. You may not be able to distinguish all of the words on this chart. This is the $2+ trillion. I think disaster relief is more appropriate than economic stimulus package that was passed recently in Washington. This is the money that's responsible for the $1,200 checks some people are getting and other people are waiting for the payroll protection program that we've been reading about that some businesses are getting, and for a lot of the small business loans. State and local governments have gotten relatively little aside from some aid to help offset the additional expenses associated with the pandemic response. I know the universities have gotten some money to help students out and to manage the shock of having to refund lots of payments that were made for housing and room and board. Those costs are fixed. You can't charge people for services you didn't deliver, and so that's created a bit of a financial crisis in higher ed. And of course, public services and hospitals are directly impacted. Bottom line, we're going to need more aid at the state level. Unlike the federal government, the Commonwealth is obliged constitutionally to balance its budget. And so if we can't generate the revenue, we're going to have to make the cuts. And without substantial additional federal assistance, it will make what's already going to be painful, extremely painful. In fact, we'll be cutting well past fat and well into bone. I'd like to conclude by highlighting, as I did for the legislators in their recent online economic forum that they convened to try to figure out how to make a revenue estimate in an environment like this, that the work that you're doing at the local level and at the work that's being done at the state level is absolutely critical. If we allow our healthcare systems to be overwhelmed, it's not just a direct threat to our family members, our neighbors, and those first responders and frontline workers. It also puts our healthcare system in the position of having to choose who receives care and who does not receive care, something that I think should be unthinkable in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, essentially putting in the hands of our local healthcare providers decisions over life and death. That I don't think a civilization can permit. And we have to, I think, make investments to be ready for returning waves of the virus should we find ourselves in that unfortunate position. The speed of our recovery, though, is to a certain extent in our hands. Our households that have lost jobs and income, our businesses that have been shut down, many of which may not be able to open up again, are going to be able to come back at a pace that's going to depend on how far we allow them to fall. And so if we let our working families and our businesses struggle on their own without additional state and federal assistance, I think we're just setting ourselves up for a very long recovery. We're living with the legacy of an inadequate response in 2008 and 2009. You all know how long it took Winthrop to recover. I certainly, as a resident of New Bedford, can attest that we've only very recently recovered from the Great Recession. And so I think we need to prioritize those human needs. One final warning, I know certainly in your community and in mine and across the Commonwealth, we've relied on healthcare organizations and hospitals and universities and colleges as a source of stable, good-paying, counter-cyclical jobs. That is, jobs that don't tend to go away during the downtime. This time, I'm nervous. It will be different for a couple of reasons. One, the quarantining and the distancing have required our healthcare providers to stop delivering the discretionary services or non-emergency care. And that's a big source of the revenue that allows them to pay their bills. And so we've blown a bit of a big hole in their revenue model. And many of those hospitals that have been a stable source of employment opportunities are already starting to lay people off, which I think is counterintuitive, but understandable in light of the reality. Similarly, in higher ed, we've been pretty countercyclical, particularly private higher education. And so if we don't take care of the institutions that help to make us a more competitive and prosperous place than many of our neighbors, then we're going to suffer accordingly. I do think the challenge facing municipal leaders in the coming year is going to be substantial. It's hard to imagine that there are not going to be deep cuts that affect the bottom line of the citizens and the leaders of the town of Winthrop. I do think we can get through this together, but I think we're going to need more help from the federal government if we're going to do it in a way that's humane and minimizes the human pain and suffering. And with that, I'd be happy to answer your questions. Thank you for having me.
Okay, Larissa, I see we have 4 people on chat. Are any of them with questions for Dr. Goodman?
No public. Let me see if we have any public comment. Do any of the counselors have a question first before I go?
Larissa, before the other counselors hop in.
I do the public first. I think we should do the public first. If they have questions for Dr. Goodman.
Okay. Bob, do you have any questions for Dr. Goodwin?
Is this to me? No.
Yes.
Thanks for giving me the mic, and thank you, Dr. Goodman. A very clear presentation. It's sobering, but a very clear presentation. Thank you very much. No questions here. I'm just happy to be informed. Thank you.
All right.
Any
Also, just, excuse me, Council President, point of order. This should be only the council asking questions right now. That's all we had prepared Professor Goodman for. Just an FYI.
Okay.
I'm at your
I believe that was the chairman of the Finance Commission, Bob. But that's okay. Any councils have any questions for Dr. Goodman?
I do, Phil.
Go ahead.
So at the beginning of your statement, the presentation, and thank you for everything, it was very informative. You noted that you kind of characterized this as more of a medically induced coma. And I guess my question is does the fact that it is medically induced allow for somewhat of a quicker recovery rather than, say, like what we had in 2008, where that seemed like it was more something that was structurally wrong with you?
Yes. So there's lots of talk about, a really terrible second quarter and some that believe that the third quarter would be better. And so they call it a V-shaped recovery. So you go down and then you go back up. I think if we get ahead of the virus and we're able to return to normal, there's no question that if there's a 40% drop in the rate of growth in the second quarter, there'll be a rise in the third quarter. But I liken it to, so I'm at home and I can't go out just like everybody else. And so like many other people, I've learned to bake. So I'm acquiring new pounds, right? I'm becoming larger. And so when I'm allowed to go outside, I'm going to lose some of the pounds, but history suggests not all of them. And so I'll be less fat, but fatter. And I think we'll be better off, but not back to where we started. I think the rest of this year is shot. And I think mostly that doesn't mean that later in the year will be better than it is now. I think unless the disease behaves in an unpredictable way again, that's not likely to be the case. But I think we can't turn the economy back on like a light switch. So for example, if Governor Baker woke up tomorrow morning and said, everybody back to work, how many people would go, right? If we opened up one of your many wonderful restaurants, how many customers are going to appear until they feel like they can be safe, even if it's allowed? I think we're seeing in places like Georgia and Florida that while there's a lot of hype, a lot of the customers are not returning. And so I think until we get ahead of this, until people feel safe, I think we're going to be struggling. Now, maybe not as badly, but I'm sorry to say, I don't think it's going to be that simple.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Does anyone have anything else?
I have one quick thought or question, Mike.
Sure.
Is there anything now we should be doing as far as preventative or proactive for next year?
I know you're very ably represented in the legislature, and so I would be taking full advantage of that if I were you.
Barbara?
Yes?
I saw
Yes.
you wanted to, do you have a question?
I was wondering, does Professor Goodman have an idea of whether we will get any federal aid to this state, Massachusetts?
Right. So that's more of a political forecast, but I've been carefully following that debate. And right now in Washington, the range of federal aid packages that are being discussed for the states ranges from 0 to $500 billion at the high end. I think that's what the Congress on the House side wants. I know the Senate Majority Leader at the national level said that he was comfortable a couple of weeks ago with states declaring bankruptcy, which I'm not sure is even legal or constitutional. And so I think conventional wisdom, as I understand it, is that we're going to get something, right? And the real question is, how much will it be? And so I do think political advocacy with the congressional delegation, but I know they all are acutely aware of this, is going to be important to making sure that, Massachusetts sends more money to Washington in our federal tax payments than we receive. And I think in a national and international disaster, it's not unreasonable to expect for some of that to come home. But it's clearly wound up in federal politics presently. I think we'll see something in the next few weeks, but I'm not really able to predict exactly whether it will be enough or not. The federal government has not been very confidence-inspiring lately, I have to say.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Goodman. Anyone else?
Council
not-
President, if I may.
Go ahead, Austin.
Professor Goodman, just wanted to thank you very much on behalf of my office, the town council, and the town for taking the time to speak with us tonight. I know this is not your typical thing that you're doing on a Tuesday night in a normal situation, let alone during a public health emergency. So just spending the time with us to give us some expert level viewpoint on the current economic situation. I really value the assistant town manager and CFO also value very much. So just thank you very much on behalf of my office for sharing some time with us.
And let me thank you for the opportunity. I'm a faculty member at the public university, so we're here to serve. And I would urge all of you to continue to to make the tough calls. I mean, I think I can imagine how much pressure everyone is under these circumstances. I think if you focus on public health, I think we're going to end up okay. If we give in too soon, I think we're going to find ourselves with the worst of both worlds, a lagging economy and a worsening health situation. So thank you for your leadership, all of you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Goodman, and thank you for being with us tonight. We truly appreciate your time.
Your public
Thank you.
university is here to serve. Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
All right, we have another presentation that was scheduled for tonight, and it's a presentation from the Zero Waste Committee that Austin had put together, our town manager, and I believe the chairman of that committee, Charles Southworth, is supposed to be on the line. Is he on with us?
Yes, I believe I am. Let me get the video started here.
Charles. Oh, there you go. You're coming up now.
Hello.
Yeah. Hi, Charles.
I'm good. Sorry, my camera's not at an ideal angle, so
You look fine. You look fine.
I don't look as good as some of you, especially now with the ships and things. Anyway, Rosalind Mott is also, I believe she got into the commenter gallery. I'm not really sure if she can speak or not, so I might need to just wing it. But yeah, a pretty short presentation. The committee right now consists of myself, Rosalind Mott, and Linda Carwalker. Previous members were Tracy Honan, and she had to, go do something else important, I understand. So she's no longer on the committee. But I shared a summary.
Walker, Charles.
Carol Walker. I'm sorry, I called you Linda. And you can talk. Great. So anyway, we've been pretty hard at work. Austin initiated the Zero Waste Committee, and I can, share a summary version of our findings. I wanted to make a quick one for this meeting, and I'll share a link for that. It's accessible online if you want to go through it. And we submitted a longer version of recommendations to his office. And you can also go through that. I figured I'd spare people the time. And one thing to note in that, we did make those recommendations just before this whole pandemic thing. So there may be a few timeline points in there which are going to most likely be extended is I think the general consensus and feeling. So just take those with a grain of salt. Anyway, let me bring that up and I can kind of just very briefly present from that document. And I think I can share the screen too.
Have each of the councils received a copy of it today by email? Okay.
Well, you'll have an opportunity to review it online if you wish to. So hopefully that'll work. All right. So I'm going to try to save you reading to you from a thing you can read. But the kind of summary of where did the Winthrop Zero Waste Committee come from is that Austin saw a need, I think based mostly on the trash contract coming to an end. We've had a trash contract with Capital Waste for quite a while, and it's been auto-renewing. And because it's been in place for quite a while, it came in at a a historically lower level than now. And because of that historically low level and market forces, costs have gone up for just waste disposal in general over time. And, the concern was, let's get ahead of this, which, as we dove into it and did a little more research, that seemed like a really valid point. So I'm really glad that he gave the opportunity. We were formed in October 2018. And we came up with a mission, work in partnership with Winthrop's town leadership to promote community education regarding the reduction of solid waste, research different approaches to waste, and assist the town manager in implementing a responsible waste management practice and contracts in the town of Winthrop, which will also benefit my toddler daughter, who you probably hear in the background. Sorry about that. And create actionable plans that enable reduction of the solid waste output for Winthrop town, citizens, and business. We did a real basic just situation analysis of, is this a real thing? What are we kind of up against here? And Capital Waste contract was originally signed in 2001. It'll expire in 2020. Due to a lot of factors, that's going to be more expensive. One of the big ones is recycling. As many people probably, you may or may not know, the cost of recycling has gone up for many local towns and nationally as well. And that's due to a change in the market demand. So where it used to be that people would kind of, I'm paraphrasing, but line up to buy your recycled materials, now the inverse is true. You actually need to pay for them to be hauled away. And that drives up the cost of recycling. So even though a large portion of our town does recycle, that now comes with a cost rather than a payout kind of situation. We also have a compost pile in town, which can handle some organic waste and things like that. That costs us around $60K a year to maintain. And, you know, just generally waste reduction seems like it's good for the local environment, enjoyment of the town, beaches, biking, tennis, all that stuff. The less waste we have just kind of floating around, the better. So having a mindset of being a little bit more, you know, just cognizant of let's get that in the trash or the waste or wherever it goes. I went over the changing market thing. And the current challenge, there's also a little bit of a just throwaway mentality that, you know, people have not through any fault, but just it has kind of been a thing that's happened in the US. I think it predates the 1980s, but the data we were able to find was that in the 1980s, people, you know, generated about 3.6 pounds of waste. 2017, they're generating almost a full pound more, 4.51 pounds. And I didn't find a fact, but I believe that trend is pretty likely to continue. I didn't find one to support it, but that's where we're at for that. So what does that all mean for us? It means that we have a contract that's going to expire, the cost is going to go up, and we should look for ways to kind of reduce that. So I should stop there for a second. Any questions about that or details? I know I'm kind of going kind of fast on that particular set of stuff.
Any councilors have a question?
Because we can go into more depth on
okay,
any of those.
Yeah, I'll ask a question. Given the fact that recycling has changed a lot, is it still worth doing?
That's a really good question, and not one I can answer because we need to work with our recycling partners. Austin, I hate to punt to you, but I feel like that kind of boils down to what kind of a contract we can get. I mean, from an environmental standpoint,
yes.
sure. But
from my perspective, and to get a beneficial contract, and to be eligible for any state level grants and funding, we need to have a recycling program. So one of the elements of any new solid waste plan that we would have would deal with our solid waste bins, and to even get grant funding to get some of those toters to roll to your curb for trash. We would have to have some form of recycling program in place, and we constantly need to report back our recycling numbers and tonnage and things like that. Honestly, although it's not a perfect system, it still is worthwhile to not throw that stuff into either a dump or an incinerator. So whatever we can do, even if it ultimately does not get made into another item, as we all kind of envision recycling doing, it is still worthwhile to pursue. And all of the incentive programs set up from different levels of government all are concerning engaging in recycling programs.
yeah, and that's a really good point. And if we don't have one set up, then we're less qualified for those grants, or not qualified at all, potentially. So there is that. And part of what we looked at was alternate recycling programs to reduce our waste stream that were not necessarily bottles or cans. A lot of the things that exist mention like doing a redemp center or a bottle fee or something like that. And that seemed like it wasn't necessarily something that was, suitable for the town to just adopt right away. What we looked for were things that were easy to implement, where we have maybe some existing infrastructure, or there's a program that provides services at a low cost. So that's where our starting point, our sort of point of what do we look for right away. If we were going to modify recycling further, or maybe consider other options, that could be further recommendations. But trying to come at it from what can we do now standpoint, it was part of our perspective. So, Austin, if you wanted to tell us to look at some other stuff later, it'd certainly be welcome. But I think maybe we're taking more of a shorter what can we do now approach based on the contract and some of the other stuff existing. Other questions?
Yeah, I have one.
Okay.
Have you done any cost analysis of, as Barbara was saying, not recycling? Is it as opposed to getting the grants, how much money you're going to get to the grants, or how much savings you're going to get from not recycling?
There's no, financially, it's worthwhile to try to recycle, bar none. We have way more grants available to us if we engage in recycling or not, compared to not. Also, I don't think we want to be a community that gets rid of our recycling program in 2020.
I'm just looking from a money's point of view right now. I'm all for recycling and the environment, but sometimes you have to draw a balance.
Well, I understood. I think if just thinking from a practical standpoint, if we're recycling and recycling is just as bad as taking out the trash, from the hauler's standpoint, which is where our costs would likely come from, they would be looking at the same exact cost scenario. So it would never be more expensive. I mean, I would think it would never be more expensive to recycle than it would be to throw out trash. So as Austin said, there are other benefits to having the recycling program. And so keeping it around would almost always make sense. And one of the things that we did need to do that we didn't quite have a lot of success and want to follow up on a little bit more was actually getting a full set of numbers from our provider. And that's in the works, but again, due to what we're going through, just been a little slow. But part of the process of getting some of the grant money and doing the filings is actually doing a detailed submission of the numbers for how many tons did we recycle, how many tons did we throw away, what did our waste stream look like in detail. And so as we kind of go forward with a little bit more of a monitored program, we'd be able to find some of those numbers and make a lot better, more informed decisions on it, rather than kind of going off the cuff and saying, well, this one costs more and we're not sure how much there is, so let's just get rid of it and see what happens. Part of participating in these programs is getting the numbers, making sure that they're measured. And I believe they're available. It just hasn't been maybe an area of focus, and I think that was part of just getting the committee to kind of look at it. And maybe we're not the end solution to that, but getting the numbers is that first step of figuring out where we are exactly on the waste stream for various things. Other questions about that kind of analysis and challenges?
Charles, why don't you go over the recommendations, the 6 recommendations here?
Sure. So we made 6 overall recommendations. And again, most of this is based on just reducing the waste stream, figuring out ways that Winthrop can throw away less. That doesn't mean that you have a hoard of trash in your house. That means that you maybe redirect some of it, or the town helps you redirect some of it to other ways of getting it out of your house. Be that, upcycling, reuse, maybe that's some composting and things like that. But reducing our waste stream for the town means that we're reducing the amount that waste hauler contract is required to handle, and we're moving that waste to some other way of getting rid of it. It's not that trash is hanging around town, but it's just alternate ways of disposing of it. So the recommendations are I think pretty much in order of how we can do them. There's a few here where we've got an option of kind of doing some quick stuff and moving onward. And there's some things that would really be a little bit more of a cost savings. The big one that I think Austin already said he needs to do anyway is just securing a 1-year waste removal contract extension, because we are, it's going to expire, but making part of that extension really measuring the waste output And as we implement some of these programs, being able to see the measured reduction, or at least the impact of those programs, to see if, if we need to keep them around or not. So really taking like a data-based approach to the waste stream, as we start to figure it out. And then once we have a little bit more data, figuring out how we would maybe re-engage our waste contract, or, maybe look at some of those areas where, for example, if we figure out that we've got a ton of metal going into the waste stream, maybe we look at ways to deal with the metal on its own, because we now know that that's something that we could, take a bite out of. It's just an example. I don't know that for a fact right now. But that's sort of step one, is just get the data, get an extension to give us some time to kind of figure this out, and don't lock us into a really long-term cost situation when we're still kind of trying to figure out and seek some better options. So that's step one. Just a general waste reduction campaign in Winthrop, that I think will help raise awareness. The idea was that as we implement some of these plans, that's a low cost way to help get participation. Obviously, if everyone is still throwing things into the trash bin or not really participating, there will be little impact to any program that's implemented. So that and along with a somewhat just an education campaign in the schools seem to be a good sort of second step. Even if we do very little, helping people have an awareness of it may just have some impact in overall just reduction, reuse, things like that. So that's a pretty easy lift, and that's why that's up there in kind of second and third step. We separated out the school versus public campaign because there's a little bit more engagement you can do in the school, and also some of the education components actually help qualify for some of the grant money and stuff that we can get. Grant money is step 3. The fourth item. Just participate in the grant funding process. It exists. It's pretty easy to do. Some light paperwork. Happily, the town manager's office already facilitated a lot of that. There's a little bit more to do. Found a typo. Grants range. Handy Google Docs, you can fix your typos. The grants range from $2,800 to $260,000, and they need to be for a specified qualifying project. And in investigating that, this is through the DEP from the state. The DEP is pretty responsive, and they're happy to coach you on qualify, how to make sure that your project will work, and making sure that you can get those funds fairly easily. We'd have to move with pretty rapid speed to get qualified and get a program in for 2020, but we can reapply in 2021, in subsequent years for qualifying projects. Recycling, organics are two that come to mind that would qualify us very easily, and these are funds for related support activities. So we've got not an unlimited budget, but we could obviously apply for several different things over time and see what worked best for us. The main thing is just making sure that we measure and get the numbers and make sure that we enable that application. And then we also have some way of implementing it and doing it, which could be volunteer, could be town staff, depending. This is the actual big cost saver here right away. We recommend that we work with somebody. Black Earth has offered to manage our compost pile. And that's a good trade-off for them from a business perspective. And for the town, it seemed like it had a lot of benefits too. That compost pile, you can see it in the larger recommendations, but that compost pile costs the town something in the neighborhood of $60K per year to operate. And some of that, I think Steve Calla might be able to provide a more detailed breakdown if you want one, or it's in the budget. But that is operational costs. And then there's also a haul out cost, because the compost pile that the town maintains takes in a lot more material than it actually, than is used by the citizens in the town. So we end up having to not only sort of maintain a compost pile, but we also have to pay to haul the material away when things like a storm hit, or we have in the spring, fall, things like that. It's a little extra for the trash haulers to do. But the bottom line is that's around a $60K cost, maybe a little more, maybe a little less per year that we can eliminate from the budget by partnering with Black Earth Composting. And the reason that they'll do that is that they need a local site to collect their compost and operate an organics program from. And they had identified early on that somewhere in this area was a great place. So when we reached out to several of the composting outfits around town, around the area, Black Earth and Bootstrap and City Compost, they came right up and said, well, our proposal is that we do some stuff for you for free, and you get some other benefits as well. So that sounded pretty good. The other programs we investigated were more trying to figure out, how they can make a buck off the town. We can offer you a program at a discount if the town will pay for half of it, things like that. This one had a much greater impact on the budget, and it also qualifies, again, for, the grants and things like that. Additionally, Black Earth, in good faith, discussed maybe adding some signage, allowing the hours to be a little bit, greater than they normally are. I think right now it's an extra, and it's open on like Friday and Saturday morning and afternoon, but not Sunday and not during the week. So overall, we'd get a larger, more robust composting program that, we'd still be able to get high quality compost back to the citizens, but we'd also lose those other costs associated with maintaining the site. The only thing we would have to do is spin up a contract to allow them to operate it and figure out whatever agreement, obviously there's an agreement that the town manager's officers have to handle, but whatever legal agreement needs to be put into place to make that happen. There's a licensing component, but they said they would work with us on that. So as long as everything kind of works and they're the experts, they said they think it can work, that might be one to pursue to really reduce costs almost immediately. It's got some benefit there. There's also the waste stream reduction, which I'll go over in the second little portion of this. The other one that was a decent addition that we could also initiate nearly right away is a program called Simple Waste, which is a textile recycling program. And textiles aren't something one typically thinks about recycling, but they're talking, sweaters, pans, household goods, and that's an upcycling kind of an approach. What they do is they provide the service totally for free to the town. They provide bags, they provide a pickup, and then they take the material, and what we become is we become a source for material that they then resell, upcycle, but otherwise distribute and make a profit on. So they offer that for no cost to the town, and we could reduce another portion of the waste stream simply by just moving it to that method of removal rather than just throwing it into the trash can. So it's kind of nice to get a little bit of peace of mind. You say, oh, okay, that sweater that I really don't like now, but as the previous presenter was saying, maybe gain a little weight, can't wear, that can go to somebody else, and I don't need to just throw it out. There's some other stuff that we thought would be helpful after we've got some of this, programs in place, which is just to initiate some waste-specific events, really just raise awareness, make sure that people continually get a heads up that the town has these programs available and that they're, of benefit and they can participate and, help them understand how. Quick questions on any of that? There's a little bit more detail we can certainly go into. Again, it's in the report, but the Black Earth composting and the Simple Waste textile recycling, those are the two where we can really reduce the waste stream so that we can measure the impact, as we kind of go forward.
Okay, why don't you go into... Go ahead, Richard. Yes,
Sorry. Since, I saw that thing, the consumption of people's waste is up. It's higher, 1.5 pounds or whatever per person per year or whatever.
Yep.
A lot of stuff is now being sent to our homes by Amazon. We're having that kind of, are there any programs available from a corporation like that who's producing a lot of that cardboard and that waste product? Are they offering any grants or anything that could be helpful to dispose of their product, basically? Shipping products?
not aware of anything from Amazon.
Charles, I can actually hop in on that.
great.
So, Rich, that's actually more of like a legislative movement that's happening across the country and is kind of gaining some steam in New England. It's called Effective Producer Responsibility. I think that's what it is, EPR. And basically what it is that, all right, you order something from Amazon, it comes in a box with some plastic inside of the box, whether it's like bubble wrap or those bigger pieces of plastic, whatever. Then there's packaging around the product itself, which is most likely unique to that product. There's a real discussion now of these people who are producing this packaging for these products having responsibility for the production of those packaging materials through the entire stream. What's been happening over years, a lot more recently, because so much stuff is being shipped directly to houses, is that it falls all directly onto the municipalities and the individual people to take care of these waste programs. And it's become unsustainable at this point in time. So there is legislation happening about that. In other parts of the world, it's been successful. In British Columbia and different provinces of Canada, they've taken up this producer responsibility. There's some countries in Europe that have pushed it all onto producers. That's kind of like the next trend in who to kind of not give the bill to, but have kind of pay into the system a little bit more, because if you pay, those companies pay on the upstream production of it, and they simplify the potential reuse and recycling of those materials, instead of like every kind of soda having a different bottle, you only have like 2 or 3, every kind of beer or thing like that having unified bottles. It works really well with aluminum cans. Like, there's only a few kinds of aluminum cans out there, and that's the reason why you know, when you get a Busch Light compared to a Bud Light, the Busch Light can is actually a recycled Bud Light can that's been pressure washed, and they've relabeled it. So across the world, there are examples, and we're already doing it in America. What we need to do is try to do it with more things. So right now, there aren't those incentives, but that's kind of like pieces of legislation being proposed in different states around the country. Massachusetts there's been a few proposals in the past couple of years concerning this producer responsibility.
Thank you. Charles, you want to finish up, and then we'll get any more questions.
Yep. Yeah, I've got about like 2 or 3 more minutes, just a couple of graphs to kind of highlight what we're talking about. I pulled up the cost benefit numbers here, and you can dive into them certainly. The big one here, I think that's important to highlight, is that the composting program, it sounds very eco-friendly and all that, which, yes, I'm a fan of that. But food waste is around 20% by some estimates of the waste stream. And if we're talking about a by weight hauling contract, getting rid of 20% of the waste stream is a nice little hit to that. And there was one thing I also forgot to mention with them, and that's that in talking about this, they get the site and stuff that they would operate for us. And as part of that, they would be able to provide a very reduced pickup service, reduced cost pickup service for people in the town that wanted it to be picked up. You could drop it off for free, but if you really want it to be picked up, you could then also get the pickup service for a very high discount, which is nice. Usually that costs a little bit more money. So wanted to just highlight that. Anyway, onward to the charts. Move this window away from the shared application. I want to share it. Can you guys see a chart here?
No.
No?
No, it's not up yet.
Let me see if I can get that back up there. Okay. All right. So really quick, just quick numbers. This is 2017. This is from the federal. I can't remember. Was it Federal Waste Statistics? Federal. Anyway, it's in the notes. The source. I think it's the FDA or something. But we found the general breakdown of waste in the U.S. for 2017 was the latest we could find. Paper and cardboard, 25%, pretty much a compostable material. Wood, compostable. Food, compostable. This is a little bit different than the number we got from Black Earth, but it's similar. Yard trimmings was another big one, fully compostable. That all adds up to about 60%, which is a pretty big thing. Even if we only get half of people getting it into the compost, that's still a double-digit number of reduction here. Call it 30, whatever. But that alone, that compost facility, that could be a really big savings in the waste stream, in addition, again, to the $60K we just save out of the budget, through getting the operation of that facility for free. There's a couple more here, I think. Go to the next one. Okay, textiles in the waste stream. This is from Simple Waste. They did a nice presentation for us, and what they said was that generally, about 15% of the total textiles are currently recovered through recycling, or people donating them or whatever. And they said, well, that's only this much of the pie. It could be this much of the pie. And they said that in Massachusetts, they operate in several local towns, that generally the textiles make up about 8% of the waste stream. So if we take 30 plus 8 or whatever, there again, it's a big number and it's pretty easy. Also, I should highlight Simple Recycling. They recycle textiles, but they also take some other kinds of used goods, pots and pans, flatware, things where they know they can resell it. So it might be a little bit higher than 8, but there again, it's a free program. Why not do it? This is the raw one without the math on it. And that's the one with the math on it. So that's pretty much it. It seems like it doesn't cost much for us to implement such a program. It's just the paperwork for getting, the paperwork and a little bit of personnel effort to get it organized, make sure that the operations can start and that it's measured, which we need to do anyway. So these seemed like easy wins, and that was why they were the first recommendations that we wanted to make. And I think with that, I'm done, unless there are questions.
Any councilors have any questions for Charles? Barbara, I see your name coming up. Any questions? Okay, if not, thank you very much, Charles, for your presentation. Thank you for the report that we all received. I will go through them and we'll take them up at further council meetings. But again, thank you and your committee.
All right, well, thanks to Austin for having us. And I'll share a couple things just as links in the chat so people can do a little bit further reading just on other communities that have had similar issues and why, if people that are attending want to dive into that to understand some of the background. Thank you very much for the time. And thanks for the other committee members too.
Thank you, Charles.
Thank you. Thank you.
Rosalind Mott, Carol Walker, thank you both very much too.
Yeah, they did a lot of this work. This was not just
we
a
hope
me show.
people get acting very soon, because they're not gonna, we're very fortunate they held the date for these grants, because we need to get going.
Okay, thank you, Carol. I'm sure Austin has a plan for that.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Goodbye.
Okay. Next, we have general information and recommendations, and two of the councilors asked to be put on in this category. And I'm going to call on Councilor Barbara Flockhart first. She wanted a discussion on the virtual notarization of signatures.
One of the many things that KPW has been updating us on is some legislation has gone through about approving the use of electronic signatures instead of wet ink signatures. A lot of it is temporary, but I think we're all going to find that some of the electronic things that we've been doing during this pandemic are going to hang around. And I think that it would be a modernization for our town to go ahead and accept those electronic signatures. We have to send in I forget what it's called, but it's something that would have to go, a certificate of vote authorization that would have to go to the legislature, which KPW has sent us, KP Law has sent us a sample of how we would do that. it would require a vote of the council. So I guess I make a motion first and then we have discussion.
No, we can't make a motion during information and recommendations. You have to make it under new business if you have a
Okay.
motion you want to be made. But I'm sure if there was a motion that Austin was doing something about signing, he would bring a motion to us. But I think if you want to do something under new business, that would be the time to do it, Barbara.
Okay.
Okay, I also have Councilor Lettieri wanted to put on a discussion of the election polling locations for November. Councilor Lettieri, you there?
I'm here, thank you. Yeah, I did want to also thank the town clerk for, I see her on the forum here. And I think that I would like to be very proactive with the upcoming elections, one in September, one in November. We don't know what we're going to have in terms of recovery and everything else. However, I look at Golden Drive and I look at the senior center and I get very leery about potentially having elections there. I also would like to look into the possibility of keeping them out of the schools as well. If we have to do a lot of cleaning and cost and everything else, now I'm not looking for any motions tonight. I just think it's a discussion that needs to be started now. And obviously one location that could be, and this isn't for, my idea is not for permanent relocation. My idea is in this year at least to get through this. We don't know what the situation's going to be, like I said, with the senior center. In Golden Drive, there's a lot of elderly population down there. I don't think we should be exposing it if we don't have to. I would like to maybe ask Austin to reach out to Rich Jafuni to take a look at the middle school. I know there's potential issues with heat and bathroom situation. I think it should.
So Jim, with the middle school, one thing with that is that we're still going to be in the midst of the Center Business District project then. So there's going to be limitations on the parking. So before we really even go down that road for consideration, I think that should be something that is kind of put on the table as well.
Well, that's something also I did think about, and the Center Business District right now is using much more parking than was supposed to be allowed because we closed the rink, so it hasn't been an issue. We could also ask them to alleviate one day of work that day too, because they're supposed to only be using, a little over 50% of the rink parking lot. And I'm not saying, I'm just saying to look at the possibilities. Ideally, I would love to keep voting out of the schools and out of the senior areas. If the schools are warranted, and if we don't have an option, I'd rather go to keep it at the APC and then go to the middle high school and not have to enforce ourselves or impede ourselves on the senior center in Golden Drive. I just think, again, I'm not asking for any recommendations. I'm not asking for a lot of talk about it. I just think that it's something that needs to be explored now, because I don't want to come into, I know there's notice that has to go out if we do move a polling place. I just don't want to wait until it's too late to react to this. I just think it's, we're treating everything like this is going to be a long impact on a lot of areas. This is something that definitely affects people, the young, being children, and the old, that, we're trying to avoid any compromising situation. So I just think it should be something that should be thought about and looked into.
Jim, Councilor Terry, one other thing with that we should add on is that, an election is a congregation of people, and instead of necessarily focusing on the physical locations of voting, I think that across the state and the country, there's significantly more exploration of not in-person voting. That's what's really happening at the state level right now, is figuring out how to best support non-in-person voting. I don't think anyone wants to see lines at polls right now. I think that what happened in March in Wisconsin really scared a lot of people, seeing multi-hour long lines because of social distancing. So although the locations are going to be important and will definitely be explored, I think a significant amount of effort between now and the fall and November is going to be more focused on how to ensure that everyone has the ability to vote regardless of location, rather than the locations themselves.
Well, I think
I
it was
second
Jim,
that.
but I
Hold on, please, hold on, please. No one has asked for the floor yet. And I have a suggestion that we send this discussion to our town clerk, Carla Vitale, since she runs the elections every year and has been running them, and have her come forward to us in the next meeting or the next meeting after that with the proposal, after she's had an opportunity to look at this and think about it and follow up with the state as to what they're doing on virtual voting, on absentee ballot voting for this upcoming election because of this. So I'm going to ask that we send this discussion to the town clerk to do a report on and have it back on the agenda at our next meeting and the meeting after, either under old or new business. Okay? Anyone have a problem with that? All right, then let's move on, because we have a lot of business yet to do. And right now, we're having a public hearing on the budget. So I am now opening a public hearing on the budget. Again, for the audience out there to call in with questions, the number is 646-558-8656, and the ID number is 879-8016-0669. And you can get those numbers off the town website as well to join in the conversation. I am now opening a public hearing on the budget fiscal year 21. Austin, are you going to handle this?
If whatever questions come over, we're more than happy to take them.
Okay.
Was this advertised?
Yes, it was advertised at least on the agenda that went out on Thursday and publicized. It was a public hearing. Denise, was it publicized in the paper as public hearing?
Yes, it was.
Okay, I know that the Finance Commission is meeting with the different department heads starting on May 7th, and they wanted to do it without a joint meeting with the council and them. So I'm going to suggest that every councilor watches those public hearings, and then if there are certain department heads they want to see come before the whole council or have specific questions for certain department heads, we will have those department heads in at one of our next 3 meetings. But hopefully it will come from a councilor requesting a certain department head to come before the council as well as the Finance Commission. Finance Commission's meetings are going to be all televised and YouTube and on Zoom. So we all can watch the Finance Commission's questioning of those department heads. But if the councils want any specific department heads to come and have questions on any specific budgets, we will have those department heads before us during the next 3 meetings.
Council President, just to expand on what you were saying, and you hit the nail right on the head with the Zoom, YouTube, and televised. We, during these trying times, have been working very hard to make sure we're still operating under the amended open meeting law that's been presented by the state. I know there have been some questions in town. I've seen some stuff on social media from some different individuals, and some questions come in. We are trying as hard as possible to have as many processes and meetings open to the public and have public input on them. If there's any meetings that come up that there are issues with, please bring them to the attention of Denise Quist or the council or my office. The only one I can think of was the meeting last week with VHB concerning the middle school site, and that was an early introductory meeting, but there will be a large public process associated with that over the coming months. So I just wanted to reiterate your point that we are trying as hard as possible to operate within open meeting law and the new stipulations of that.
Oh, since this is a public hearing, is there anyone on chat? I saw that there were 2 people on chat that have questions. Larissa, are there questions during the public hearing?
There's 2 folks. I can click over.
Okay, can you put them on?
Sure.
One at a time, please.
Hi, Wendy, do you have any public comment?
Wendy, would you please identify yourself? And this is a public hearing on the budget for 2021.
Hi, Wendy Millar-Page, Precinct 2. Greetings, everyone. I
Greetings.
have a specific question. I would like to get some answers, and I think we'll get some as the discussion continues, but looking at the budget as a whole, this year, I feel that it's much more understandable when you have the interactive online. But one of the things that a few folks that have been reaching out to me that are a little bit more on the elder side or not as technically savvy, even if they're younger, are having a hard time finding the different numbers with the tabs. And it's just something that I wanted to make sure everyone's aware of, because we're getting, you know, and when you're sitting down having a lot of time at home and people are sharing their concerns about the budget, they can't find it and they say it's not there. And so I don't know if we have a person that could help out with that from the council, or instead of it being, it's a suggestion that it be made a little bit easier for some of the folks who are looking for, say, how much money comes in at the E.B. Newton, or how much did we spend on, you know, tire rotation on the trucks. I know it's in there, but it even takes me a while, and I'm pretty tech savvy.
Wendy, I would say if you wanted to, I'm trying to think of the best way to engage on that. Calls to our office are probably the best way. Then people can kind of get their train of thought out concerning the individual items that they're looking for. We do have some physical copies of the budget now. That said, that doesn't necessarily help people kind of decipher some of the language in it. So I kind of tell everyone along the way, if there are specific questions, feel free to reach out with the specific questions. Anna Friedman and I are here to answer them to the best of our abilities. And if we can't answer them in real time, we'll gladly do the research for you and point you in the direction. Like I said, if there's any topic that needs further explanation, we'd be more than happy to walk people through it. And you know, if there are items that you feel like are really, really hard to find, please let us know, because we're trying to make it as easy to decipher as possible. We're trying to add some different guides in and stuff like that to make it easier for people to understand. So if you hear or you encounter something that you really can't find, please bring it to our attention, and we'll try to work with you on that.
Thank you.
Hey, Wendy.
In that way, thank you.
Okay, you're done?
I'm done.
Okay, is there anyone else? You said there was a second person online? Larissa?
It doesn't, it appears that they hung up. So
Okay,
I don't
Barbara.
see anybody else.
Okay, any counsel? I see Barbara Flockhart keeps coming up as talking. Barbara, you want questions?
No, I think that's just because I'm on the phone.
Okay, it keeps coming up, Barbara's talking, all right. All right, no question for Barbara. Any other councils have questions at this time? I know you received the hard copies just recently, but you got the other copies back just before the last meeting. Hopefully, if you have any questions, now would be a good time to start throwing those questions out. No questions?
Hey, Matt, I can't see myself.
Yep, you lost Tracy. Where did Tracy go?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, do you have questions, Tracy?
No, I think I'm appearing as Stephen Ruggiero, and I'm having trouble with my video.
Well, we'll help you get it back on through Larissa and Denise. If there's no other questions on the public hearing, I am going to continue this public hearing to our next meeting. And I'll entertain a motion to do that, to continue the public hearing on the fiscal year budget 2021 to the next town council meeting. Do I have that as a motion?
Motion.
Okay, by
Second.
Councilor Farino, seconded by Rob DeMarco. Any discussion on that? Hearing none, we'll take a roll call vote. Denise?
Councilor Ruggiero,
Yes.
Councilor Flockhart,
Yes.
Councilor DeMarco,
Yes.
Council Christopher? Council Honan?
Yes.
Council Farino?
Yes.
Councilor Conti?
Yes.
Vice President Lettieri?
Oh, that's fine.
President Boncory?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, that, public hearing will be continued to the next, 2 meetings anyway. All right, public comment is now. Do we have anyone on for public comment? I'm surprised. We always have some public comment.
I see one person, hold on.
Okay.
Hi, caller.
Hi,
Hi, would you identify yourself, please?
I think this
it's
uses
Karen Chavez.
I'm sorry.
another 2 hours.
It's
Who is
Karen
this?
Chavez.
Oh, John Sullivan, is that what you?
Karen Chavez.
Oh, it's Karen?
Yes, it is.
Karen, how are you? You've never missed a meeting. That's why I was surprised
Okay.
when we did. Go ahead.
You know, I just had one comment about Wendy. Towards the back of the budget book, I don't know if the town manager's office noted it, but the page is like from 130 to 150. Some of them are double numbered. Some of the enterprise funds are like listed at page 143. And when you want to look for a capital improvement, it's also page 143. It's just a miscount of numbers. You have to stop and look.
Anna, yeah.
Sorry, apologies for that, Karen. That's only an issue for the printed version, which the councilors and members of the Finance Commission have right now. The page numbers are on the online version, so hopefully folks will be able to navigate that without an issue. That's an unfortunate situation happened because we printed part of it at one time and part of it another time. So we'll just let me know if you're having trouble finding anything, and I can point you in the right direction. Sorry about that.
No, I just wanted people to be aware of that, because when I first looked at it, that's what I found. So maybe other people are finding the same thing. That's all. It's just a comment. That's all.
Okay.
Thanks for flagging. We'll fix it.
Okay, thanks.
Karen, I know you're on the Finance Commission. You're going to be having meetings on the budget for the next month and a half or so before a report comes to the council. Do you have anything to ask of right now?
She hung up.
Oh, she did. Okay. All right. Well, for the public, so far the printed copies have gone to the Finance Commission and to the council. And there are a few, if someone is truly wants to get one, they can go up to Town Hall and get a copy of the printed version of the budget. Okay? Any other public comment? Do we have anyone else on the line, Larissa?
No, I only see our assistant CFO and Wendy Millar-Page if she wants to come back. I don't know if she has another comment.
All right. Well, if she wants to come back, let her come back, because she was mentioned by the last person.
Wendy, did you have any additional comments?
Not at this time, thank you.
All right.
Okay, thank you, Wendy. All right, moving on. Correspondence. The council received a correspondence from Lieutenant Nancy Dalrymple of the Winthrop Police Department requesting an opportunity to come before the council and to discuss her objective of staying on the job past the age limitation. That was not on the agenda for this meeting, so that will be put on the agenda for the next meeting, and Lieutenant Dalrymple will have an opportunity to come before the council. Okay. Committee reports. Can I have a report from the Finance Committee?
You can. Finance Committee met last night via Zoom. And basically, because when we referred the budget, we referred it to the Finance Committee, and I just wanted to hold a meeting, but the budget is actually referred to the Finance Commission, which we'll be getting back. We did meet to just pass on to the Finance Commission. The only discussion, the discussion was on one subject. We did have some discussion, and it basically focused on making amendments to the budget. In the past, you know, it seems to be when we vote on the budget that night, it's I don't want to say a free-for-all, but everybody, whoever might be jumping in, and it seems to be, it's like survival of the fittest. The first come seem to get more of a chance to have an amendment being made. But so what the Finance Committee is going to do is, and I thank Councilor Christopher for a suggestion on this, is to, hold a meeting after the Finance Commission's report is done, and want to try to take out any amendments that the Finance Commission's made. Bob Wynn, who chairs the Finance Committee, is just an amazing individual, and that committee has had some really long-time members that offer a lot, and the verbiage on the report is always very articulate and extremely well-written, and we want to try to maybe extrapolate all the amendments into individual amendments, so gives the council a little bit more of an opportunity to look at any specific changes they're looking for. Also, if any councilors would like to make an amendment, we would like to have the opportunity to have a Finance Committee prior to the council meeting. So again, there's nothing being, last minute kind of say, oh, I have a motion, I want to, do such and such. So we're trying to have a little bit more order, I guess, to the way the amendments are being brought up. Not that it's in stone and it has to be like that, but if we could have it like that and as concise as possible, and have the councilors with any questions, they could come to the Finance Committee before and have a better feeling about it. But that was basically all we discussed, is the potential for motions for the budget. We did discuss a little bit the possibility, because I think CFO Friedman had said, in Austin, I think it said too, that there's a slight, or I don't want to say slight, there's a possibility that budgets, or the timeline for budgets might be extended. There are different pluses and minuses, I guess, to that, and something that we'll have to take a look at if the opportunity presents itself. I guess the opportunity might be that we'd have a better idea of what we're getting for local aid, but that's not necessarily a guarantee. And so, we did talk about that a little bit. But other than that, that was it. It was a relatively quick meeting. And that is it for finance.
And hopefully we won't have to expend our vote on the budget, and we have the information by the last meeting in June, and we can get this passed.
Correct.
But let's move on. The next committee report is a report from the Joint Committee on the Middle School Project.
Yep.
And the middle school's rezoning project. I don't know whose lead is that, Tracy or Peter?
Yep, I'll do that.
Councilor Honan, please.
Okay, so the meeting was a preliminary meeting of the Joint Committee, and the Joint Committee consists of the Economic Development Committee and the Rules and Ordinances Committee. And the meeting was called to facilitate introductions, as well as to discuss the purpose of utilizing VHB, which is a civil engineering company out of Boston, and as well to discuss the public process, what it would look like for zoning the middle school. VHB will be utilized by the town of Winthrop to facilitate the process of developing the old middle school site. And it's the intent of the facilitation with VHB to ensure adequate and effective community outreach in regard to the site, to provide help with project visioning, to determine and remediate any roadblocks to development, and to aid the town in the drafting of an appropriate zoning ordinance to apply to the development, which can ultimately be submitted to the planning board for consideration. So when we met, like I said, it was a very preliminary meeting, mostly introductions, and to give VHB some history of what the town has done in the past. I think all town councilors attended, and it was a productive discussion.
Thank you. Thank you. The next committee report is Appointments Committee and Appointments Committee and its commissions.
Thanks, President Boncory. Happy Cinco de Mayo, everybody. We met yesterday. We met last night, and we went over employee evaluation forms. They were sent out to the employees last week, and all the employees did a great job and thoughtful job getting them back to me, and we started going through them last night. We have phone calls set up with the employees this week. and we should be ready to present our final report at the next town council meeting in 2 weeks.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Councilor DeMarco. I understand that Town Clerk Carla Vitale had her hand up. She wanted to speak. It's probably about the job I gave her, sent over the polling places. Carla, are you here? Larissa, is Carla online?
She is online.
Hi there, how are you?
Well, how are you, Carla?
Good, thanks. I just wanted to touch base. I heard Councilor Lettieri's remarks earlier, and I just wanted to say thank you for bringing this out to everyone's attention earlier rather than later. I'll definitely have a little memo put together before your next meeting. But while we were talking about it, I just wanted to put out there that I think on September 1st and then again in November, I will definitely be needing people to work the polls. I know I say that all the time, but I think with the virus, the majority of my poll workers are upwards of 70 years old. And I expect that many, if not most, will decide not to work this fall. So while we're thinking about elections, if anyone knows anyone or if anybody's listening, I certainly need folks to work. I agree with Austin. I think a lot of it's going to be done by mail, but not all of it. And so I will need help. So anyone, if they have any interest and they're hearing this, please shoot me an email or call my office and we can talk about getting everybody set up for the fall. That's all.
Okay, Carla, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, before we move on to the town manager's report, as I said at the beginning of the meeting, I was very happy to see so many people wearing their masks in town when they're going into stores. And I know Al Legee, who is our building inspector, went out yesterday again and checked every single business to make sure that the workers in the business were wearing their masks and their gloves. And he said there was like a 95 or more percent people accommodating and doing what they're supposed to be doing there. And he had a very good report in all the places he went. There were some people the first time he went out a week or two ago that were not complying, and they were warned, and they are now all complying. No one has had to be fined because they are all in compliance. Every store, every restaurant is in compliance. But while we're talking about masks, I had a discussion with the chief of police earlier, and he says the police station is getting inundated with phone calls from people calling about people not wearing masks. So I asked the chief of police to please present a presentation on what is right and what is wrong in mask wearing.
Thank you, Mr. President, and good evening to everyone else. Certainly, we have an increase in call volume about mask wearing, and I just wanted to take this opportunity to outline when it's appropriate to wear a mask and when it's not appropriate to wear a mask, and also some federal and state laws that we have to comply with for people with medical conditions. That's important, and also businesses must comply. There's hefty fines for violation of those ADA requirements. When someone has a medical condition and can't wear a mask. So to begin, I think local ordinances and orders from the health and the council, as well as the state order from the governor, dictates a mask shall be worn when people cannot social distance outdoors. It must be worn in all businesses and all car sharing services. If you're alone in your own car, you do not need a mask. And certainly if you're out walking, jogging, or bicycling, you do not need a mask if you can social distance. I find that in large amount, people are in compliance. People are yielding to other people on sidewalks. They're stepping into people's driveways while other people pass when they don't have masks on. So I think we here understand, I think it's an educational issue that we need to make sure that the general public understands that they shouldn't be confronting other people about masks. If they have an issue or question, they can call the business line. Don't use the 911 line, but use our 1212 line and ask to speak to an officer, and we can educate them when it's appropriate not to be wearing a mask. We do encourage everyone to be wearing masks, even when they're not required to. But as far as the orders and the laws go, we got to be very careful on making and setting expectations that people don't need them on at every single moment of the day when they're out walking the streets or bicycling or jogging. So I really wanted to get that message out there tonight. We've had several calls of irate people, and confronting other people and causing a disturbance over the last weekend. And as the longer we go into this epidemic and pandemic, the more frustrated people will become, and the more hostile they'll become towards each other. So I think it's important to take a step back, to call us if you have a question, and be happy to respond and evaluate the situation. So again, on the federal side, there's been advisories from our town attorneys, as well as from the Department of Justice, that, you know, someone who cannot wear a mask is entitled to reasonable accommodations, and business owners should be aware of that. They should also be aware of what their obligations are under that. And tomorrow I'll reach out to the chamber to ensure that the flyers I have and the flyers that other states have put out, our chamber has, and they can run it through their lawyers and put out to their business associations, so they're not having these points of conflict. When someone says, I have a medical condition, they can't inquire into what that medical condition is, and they can ask for proof of that. But they can ask them, have someone do their shopping for them. They can ask them to shop at the senior hours and make those reasonable accommodations around their medical condition to limit the spread. So I thank you for this opportunity, and I'll be happy to answer any questions if anyone has any.
Thank you, Chief. Any council have any questions for the chief?
President Boncory, I have a general comment to piggyback on what the chief was just saying. And I've been talking with a couple of people on the council, and I've been actually greatly impressed with how well the citizens of Winthrop have done in wearing masks and also self-distancing. You know, me and my wife have gone for walks, and people don't just walk around us. They walk 20 feet outside of us across the street, and we do the same. And every store I go into, somebody's wearing a mask. And, you know, we bought our kids masks, so when they go in stores, they can wear the masks. I mean, I think most of the town has done a great job with it. Unfortunately, on the other side, there is one problem that I want to address. And I've had a member of my family who was outside running, nowhere near anybody, and somebody screams derogatory insults at her for not wearing a mask. My kids were down the marsh getting ready to put a paddle board in the water. They're 9 and 7, and somebody 50 yards away from a balcony on the 3rd floor of a house starts swearing at my kids, using profanity because they weren't wearing a mask. I understand a lot of people are scared, and I understand a lot of people think you should wear a mask at all times. And if you want to say something to somebody, that's your right. I'm just urging the public to do it respectfully and show some class. We're better than that, okay? And that's just a point I wanted to make sure I made. If you have a problem with somebody because they're not wearing a mask and you want to say something to them, do it respectfully and do it with class.
Right. Chief, do you have anything else, Chief? Any other council have anything they want to say about it? While the chief is on? Okay, we'll move into the town manager's report.
Council President?
Did someone ask?
Yeah, before we go into that, just
Councilor Terry, go ahead.
On the committee meetings, I know the Millerfield was not on the agenda, but I just want to let everyone know that we have, I believe, and the town manager can verify, we have re-upped, I guess, Skanska. We have amended Skanska's contract, and they are starting work now on the shed at the golf course as well as the dog park. And town manager, that's correct, right, as far as the amendment?
That's correct.
Thank you. So that's
great. It's great to have Chuck back. Let's get this thing going.
Thank you, Council President.
Town manager, report.
Sure. Excuse me. Sorry about that. First off, is Meredith Hurley on? I just want her to give a quick update on COVID-related stuff.
Yep, I'm here.
Thank you.
How are you?
Hi, Meredith.
Hi. Also
Thank
down
you
in-
for everything you do.
Hey, no problem. Well, we'll see. Yeah, it's getting a little long down here, but I think that we're doing a good job. Today, like President Boncory had said, we saw two new cases reported, and the good shift being 97 people recovered, 80 are still isolated. Unfortunately, we've had 11 lives lost to this disease at this point. So that's where we're at today. We're cautiously hopeful that we are going to be seeing at least a leveling off tomorrow. I know many people have heard about the contact tracing initiative through the Department of Public Health. That goes live tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. So I'm curious to see how that's going to go, if it's going to be as impactful and helpful as it's being projected to be. So I'm anticipating some snafus with the framework of DPH initially, but hopefully we can get it worked out sooner than later. And if anybody has any questions, happy to answer them.
I have one question for Meredith.
Sure.
Go ahead, Councilor Terry.
Thank you. First of all, a comment, Meredith, you are doing an amazing job, an incredible job. And I know, this is one thing I think I could speak for everybody here in agreement that, we're very lucky to have you. Thank you. So the question I have is getting tested easier now if somebody is looking for a test or wants to get tested? Are there still certain requirements that you need to have to get tested, or how does that process work?
No, it depends on the place, but in our area, I find that people are, the testing access has increased significantly. For folks that, I mostly refer people that are known contacts to a confirmed case, and I refer them either to Beth Israel and Chelsea on Broadway, or Mass General outpatient in Chelsea. They're both doing walk-up testing, they're doing appointment-based testing, and they've waived all of their requirements, meaning you don't have to be a patient of either facility, you don't need insurance, they don't ask necessarily who your ordering provider is, like your PCP doesn't need to order it, they don't ask immigration status. They mostly just ask your name, your address, your phone number, just so that they can get in contact with you for the results. So, and quite a few people that I've referred over to both of those have had good experiences. I also know that those that are linked into the partner system can go online and request appointments. I've had a few folks go up to Lawrence and Lowell to be tested through that system, and they've had good success with it. So, which is great because that was our biggest struggle, even up until about 10 days ago.
Thank you.
Okay, anyone else have any questions?
Council President, I have a question for Meredith.
Okay, Councilor Giro.
Thank you. Hi, Meredith. Thank you so much for everything that you do. Just a quick question related to some of our newer cases. Are you finding that they are, have the folks with cases that are coming up more recently, are they being in contact with someone who has previously tested positive? Is that what you're seeing? Is there a connection, or are these cases more so isolated and individualized? So
I'm finding the majority of cases that we've gotten released to us in the last about 8 to 10 days have been primarily household contacts. We've also had the unfortunate experience of a long-term care facility here that all 21 patients have tested positive in that facility. Also linked to, excuse me, about 8 staff members, not all of them living here in Winthrop, so working through that situation. But yes, I wouldn't be able to tell you exactly off the top of my head, but when I'm looking at the data and I'm looking at the cases based on addresses, I'm seeing less addresses, new addresses come up in the last 2 weeks, but the increase in cases is primarily in households that we call them an index case, and index cases are already been identified in.
great, thank you.
Any other questions for Meredith? Thank you for explaining that. There really are not any hot spots in this town, other than that facility you spoke of. Okay, any other questions for Meredith? Dawson, you're back on. Thank you so much, Meredith, for everything.
No problem.
Thank you, Council President. Thank you, Public Health Director Hurley, as well, and to the chiefs, everyone who's working in the EOC. They have been working extraordinarily hard. In addition, outside of the EOC, we have a fair amount of staff that's been working around the clock as well. And I just want the community to realize that although our physical buildings may be close to the public, people are still hard at work. I brought this up during the budget presentation concerning kind of the old butts and seats mentality about municipal workers and government. These are different times, but we are still providing a high level of service, even though people can't be physically at their desks. So although the buildings may look dark and quiet, people are hard at work. People are still processing tax bills, still getting the mail, going through things, still making permits and things like that. So as much as we can do across town, many members of the staff are still working. Although the world has kind of ground to a halt, us in our municipal lives haven't really had the ability to stop. We have been either working remotely or working in our same offices and setups. So just again, thank you to my staff that's been working very hard in this. I know that we give so much credit to some of the people who get to speak publicly in these meetings, but just want to make sure that everyone who's working gets the same type of credit across the board. So what I wanted to bring up today was a survey that was sent out to the town about 2 weeks ago concerning the impact of our communications from the town manager's office in the town concerning this public health emergency. Unfortunately, on the top of the report, it says town of Winthrop, Mississippi, which I will get that edited, but it is clearly all of our information. And just a few very poignant things that I wanted to hit on. One, that expressed the importance of us having an effective communication strategy. We've kind of talked about this multiple times. It came up during the offsite with the council when they set some goals for the coming fiscal year. Our outward communications are very important. What we are realizing is that a lot of people rely on these communications. So we have about 90% of the people who responded to this, and we had 614 responses in a town of 18,000, which, like, this is statistically significant. We can rely on this data to get a good understanding of what we're doing for the community and how they feel about our information. So 90% of the respondents are following the measures that we've put into place to keep the coronavirus from spreading most of the time or always, which that is a good number. We want it to be in that 90% range. We have our social media and what we're putting out in terms of the daily press releases are informing about 50% of the population as their first news source for corona-related information, COVID-related information, and that only falls behind official local news services. So a lot of people in town are actually relying on the information that we're putting out day to day. People are worried about the same type of things that we see on the news and we're dealing with as a town. So the local economy recovering. We had an economist here earlier just talking about that specific item. Food and supply shortages and people's security in their own food is the next topic that came up as the most important. That's why we made food security one of the most important items from the beginning of this public health emergency. And then people are concerned about their own personal loss of income. One thing that I want to hit on is the last thing. Oh, there's two things. The big point is that almost 2/3 of the population of the town that responded to this, so more than 400 of the 600 surveyed, believe that the measures enacted by town are balanced, which I think that's good to know that a fair amount of the population doesn't believe that we're being overreaching in what we're doing. We are totally cognizant of what we've been asking the community to do, what the state has been asking the community to do as well. But this survey shows that it's a fair amount of the community believes in what we're doing and that we're working hard on it, and we're kind of pointing them in the right direction. And then some of the things that people are looking for additional information on are parking enforcement and parks and open spaces. Both of those are kind of unique and hard to deal with in this situation. Parking, we have been trying to alleviate in certain areas that attract kind of recreationally minded people from outside of the community. And we have been trying to work on that. Deer Island comes to mind on that one, and some of the state beaches. So we are working on that and parking enforcement. It is also one of those, as the chief talked about, it's kind of like a utilization of resources. We don't necessarily want to be focusing the police's time on parking enforcement while we're in the midst of a public health emergency, and their services could be more necessary doing something else for the community. So this report, the whole council has, and if anyone in the public would like to see it, we have the information available internally as a report, but it was very eye-opening to see that these press releases that we're doing on a daily basis on behalf of the town are being utilized from the town. We see the responses on them, and a large response to a survey like this is very helpful for us to be able to understand our usefulness of what we're doing during these times. So we appreciate the 614 residents that did the survey. There may be more surveys coming soon about the middle school site or zoning in town or Wing 2030 and stuff like that. So hopefully we can kind of keep up these types of survey numbers, because when you get 600 responses, you can really rely on the information. So thank you to everyone in the community that participated. And with that, that's my manager's update for right now. You're still on mute.
Yeah, anyone have any questions for the town manager? Councilor Christopher.
So with the Zoom meetings that we've been having, at least in subcommittees and whatnot, I know that we've had some issues with public participation, and I wanted to see if it was going to be possible for us to maybe get a higher Zoom access or something. I know we had to cancel a meeting last night because we couldn't have two at the same time, and I don't know if it's been intentional or not. I'm assuming that the meetings are being staggered for that reason, because we had a meeting at 8 o'clock last night. I was wondering if it was possible for us to maybe expand the amount, if there's like some way we could have two at the same time, or perhaps even three. And also if there was a way maybe for us as counselors to figure out how to operate the Zoom as like a host, sort of like how this meeting is being done.
Sure. I can take this offline with Carla and Denise and Larissa. We have a few Zoom licenses. We've been trying to kind of manage them and keep the costs down. But we do have the ability, these town council meetings are done as webinars rather than meetings. We do have 2 webinar licenses. So let me talk with them offline about this. I think this should be a relatively easy fix. And again, my apologies, we're still kind of figuring out our way with these meetings. We're a little bit different world.
And just a quick add-on to that, if I may.
Councilor Ruggiero.
Just not only our subcommittee meetings, but also other governing body meetings here. I had a constituent reach out to me recently looking to attend another body's meeting later this month. And so it would just help us if we can have something sort of documented and memorialized such that, I could direct this constituent to be able to participate in that meeting that's happening later on this month.
I think Councilor Ruggiero wants to have a precinct meeting for his precinct, and I think that's what he's trying to see if we can set up to do.
Absolutely. Just coordinate with our office.
That as well, sure.
Okay. Just to follow, anybody else have questions for town manager?
Just a couple follow-up. Hoping, our next meeting is scheduled for May 19th. I'm hoping that we have some sort of loosening up of some policies in the state, and maybe we'll be able to somehow get at least some of us back in the Harvey room. But I would like to ask, maybe through the town manager for this, to WCAT, if Mike is there, or if the council manager, town manager can answer, that would be great. Are we set up whenever we do get back to the Harvey room to have, is all the equipment set up and ready to go? Right, and Austin, on the zero waste, discussion we had earlier, it was good. It was very well thought out. It looked like they put in a lot of time. This is a $1.2 million line item. I don't know. Obviously, whenever we go to a contract, it's going to go up. Maybe we do some stuff to keep it back where it was. But they don't seem to be looking at any possible shared expenses in that, in their vision. Is that on purpose, or is that something that you're looking in a different way?
So Mike Cabral just muted. I just had wanted to tell him to do that. So this group, my initial ask was to look into that as well. That is something that is strictly under the purview of the council to set the fees and examine the fees. There is a discussion about the potential increased costs in the larger report. And this is something that I think over the course of fiscal 21, that would lead to a ramp up of a new waste program, most likely this time next year, with the procurement of new barrels and being able to roll them out and things like that for solid waste. At that point in time, I agree with you that I think there should be an exploration of a solid waste fee. I think that that is something that needs a fair amount of public interaction on, though. So this manager's report gives us somewhat of a path forward of how to reduce the overall solid waste. That said, how we pay for all of the elements of the solid waste program, they didn't necessarily tell us the exact path on how to follow for that.
And they did mention grants, potential grants, but they, at least I didn't see, what's the potential size of those grants? I mean, are these, a lot of work to get like 10 grand, or is it a lot of work to get 100 grand?
It depends. It depends on the type of program that we're looking for. We will be pushing pretty hard in one of these grant programs for some type of help with the procurement of those barrels. So we would have unified solid waste barrels across town. That cost is pretty high cost, unfortunately, on a per barrel basis. We could bake some of that into a solid waste contract with whoever our solid waste provider is at the time, but they may not necessarily want to take it over the term of the contract, or they may only want to take a piece of it during that contract. So we would want to try to get some type of grant in line for the procurement of barrels to try to quantify our waste stream and limit it a little bit. There is, that said, when you talk about the money, there is more available for more aggressive waste reduction programs. So that's something that they didn't talk about in their presentation. But if we were to, per se, roll out I believe it's a 35-gallon barrel, compared to a 65-gallon barrel, there's a chance that we could have DEP pay for every single barrel that we roll out in town. That said, that puts a real cap and limit on the amount of waste that you can have enter into the stream. So that may be a harder pill for the community to swallow, with everyone kind of having overflow trash with a 35-gallon bin versus being comfortable in a 65-gallon bin, but not having that initial capital to pay for it. So the grants are very much tailored towards more aggressive waste removal strategies. So we're gonna do some of the initial survey work that we have to do, and get working on kind of getting us in line with what other municipalities are doing in terms of solid waste, and then the modernization stuff will come over the fall into like this time next year to roll out. Again, the fee part of it, I would say, should be part of the discussion in terms of fiscal prudence.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions for the town manager? All right, hearing none, I want to reiterate what he said about the staff and the people that are working for this town. They are going above and beyond. The people that work in that EOC, the fire, police, healthcare provider, DPW, all these towns, they're working almost 24/7. I mean, you saw Meredith online now at 8 o'clock at night. She's been there since probably 7 o'clock this morning, and she's still in there working. I want to also thank Larissa and Denise, who set up these webinars, and they're in their chairs and their offices most of the time, every day. And when they're not, Denise Quist is out there working the food bank, and she's in there 2 hours every day, beside being in her chair when she needs to be in her chair, and when she needs to be in night doing a webinar or a Zoom meeting. So I really appreciate that, Denise. Thank you. Speaking of the food bank, I spoke to the chief today, and we have plenty of food in the food bank, but our call volume has been going down. If you need food, please call the EOC. Please go on to the town website, call the EOC. There is food there. If you need food, they will deliver it to you. I know there's no way to drive up and get it anymore, but it is being delivered every day. Every day there are deliveries going out to people needing food. So if you need food, please, that's one thing Winthrop is doing. We can supply food. So if you need food, please call the EOC. For any students, the school department still is doing lunches every day from 11 to 1 behind the middle school and high school. On the loading deck, there are sandwiches, there are hot meals, and I'm going to talk about them, and there is breakfast packages. So if you're a Winthrop student in any school, not just the high school or the middle school, any school, you can go by there and pick up lunch. All right. As far as the school department report, we had a meeting with the school department on the 27th, and we passed 2 of the contracts. But at the present time and right now, Lisa Howard is working diligently on implementing phase 3 of the remote learning program. It's begin this week. It includes a focus on getting students ready to transition into their next grade. There's planning underway as well for students and staff to collect their belongings from the school prior to the summer, which would have been the summer recess. As soon as the governor lessens some of the restrictions on the closings of the school will be open for students and staff to pick up their belongings. The Winthrop High School senior class, the principal and superintendent are working very closely with the class and their class offices to determine a graduation plan. There are 3 different options being discussed right now as to how graduation will occur, whether it be a virtual graduation, whether it will be a graduation in the gym or on Miller Field with social distancing. What a typical graduation that they've been doing in the past in the gym with families attending would require the state to withdraw all restrictions. So most likely would be a graduation outside or a graduation where there would be students attending, receiving their scholarships, and the scholarship program is going well. So there would be a program with graduation and scholarships, but It might be one that will be televised and the families will have to watch it and not be in actual attendance. But it's being worked on. There are 3 or 4 different options that they are working on right at the current time. Summer school programs, they're also working on setting up summer school programs for people that need that. There will be remote programs, and they're just waiting for the state guidelines to adjust them. The Arthur T. Cummings School Playground is going on as experienced. It will be up probably before the June, and it will just hope the governor opens up the parks before then so you could use them, but it will be put together before June. The school lunch program is free to any Winthrop public school student, Monday through Friday, 11 to 1. As I said, hot lunch is served on Tuesdays and Thursdays, sandwiches on the other days. Please go by and pick up sandwiches. It's not being used as well as we thought it would be used, but the food is there for people in Winthrop. And I believe that's it. The superintendent of schools is going to be meeting with the Finance Commission on her budget on Thursday, this coming Thursday at 6:30. So that will be online as well, and anybody can watch that. And anybody has any comments on the school budget, they can call into that meeting, as you could call into this meeting. And as I said, you call into this meeting because we're having another public comment in a minute, and that number is 646-558-8656, and ID is 879-801-60669. If you'd like to be heard, the next public comment, please call in. We're on to old business, and the only item under old business is the budget for fiscal year 2021. And as we said in the public hearing, we will move that over to the next council meeting as old business. Under new business, we have a town council motion to transfer $50,000. Councilor Terry, would you like to be heard on this? You're on mute. You got to unmute yourself.
I don't have the motion in front of me. If you have the motion to read, I do not have it on my agenda. Okay, I think it came after.
I thought you meant it. All right, town council motion is titled Emergency Response Second Funding Request. Motion ID is town TCM 20033. The motion details are it's a motion type for emergency special article appropriation submitted by the town manager, Austin Faison. And the motion is, I move that the town council vote to transfer $50,000 from free cash excuse me, to general fund special article FY20 COVID-19 response in order to fund certain costs associated with the current public health emergency or take any other action thereto. It is a motion that is being put forward by town manager. You want to discuss it, town manager, before I take the actual motion from a council member?
No, it's just in this crazy time, instead of spending certain lines into deficits, we would prefer to move money from stabilization funds to continue spending to kind of alleviate some matters during this public health crisis. But Anna Friedman provided a memo to the council yesterday. If there are any questions that come up to the motion, feel free to propose them to Anna and I. We're here. Thank you.
I believe the motion was put forward last Thursday. It made it onto the agenda. And I think everybody has seen a copy of it. The free cash balance before this motion is $414,628.40. This motion is pending, is requesting $50,000. and that would leave a balance in the free cash of $364,628.40. But I have a motion to take this up as an emergency motion.
Motion.
Motion by Councilor DeMarco.
I have one question.
I need a second first.
Okay.
I'll second it.
And seconded by Councilor Christopher. Okay, discussion on the emergency part of this motion.
The question I had wasn't on the motion. It was on the breakdown you sent me in, to sent the council. I noticed there's a lot of overtime, and I just, could you elaborate on that a little bit? Just as to why we've had so much overtime expenses.
Can folks hear me?
Yep.
And I'll kick this over to Chief Delahanty, as these costs are related to our staffing needs at the EOC. And these are the sort of primary costs that will need to be, that is attributed to the pending request in front of us that will pay for these costs going forward, depending on how long the current situation continues. But I want to just kick it over to the chief if he could just provide some more detail on those overtime costs for folks.
Sure. So it's the overtime costs do associate with the officers here, 8 hours a week for the one for the lieutenant, 4 hours for the sergeant. On Fridays, they're only work 37.5 by contract. We're a 40-hour operation. So on Fridays, they do get overtime. And also we have a firefighter assigned here on overtime each day. As we know, both departments run minimal staffing because of budget restrictions. So we still have to have so many firefighters on each truck. So any additional assignments, that goes to an overtime cost as well. Other overtime expenses to deal with the COVID response is additional bike patrols that we put out. We only put them out when the weather is nice, and we scrutinize the time of the day we put them out and their need and what we want them to do. All has to do specifically with the COVID-19 response, face masks, social distancing, and that. I just want to bring out, we talked about overtime. We still have 2 dispatches that are assigned here at no cost to the town from the regional dispatch center. So they will be pulling one of those dispatches out starting next week. We'll be down to 1 dispatcher. We don't anticipate an increase in need on further overtime. But if I looked at the overtime cost correctly, Counselor, it's about $2,000 a week over the 8-week period. Is that roughly what we're talking about, correct?
Well, I'm looking at it. First week was 9,000. The second week was 3,000. The third week was 5,000. The fourth week was 5,000. The fifth week was 5,000 change. Not exact numbers. I'm rounding them off. 6,000. Week 6 and week 7 was 5,000.
So I can give you a better breakdown on which departments that's associated with. Roughly a firefighter is about $318 a day for an 8-hour day. So that's the breakdown on, and the police department is going to be about the same. So that those are associated with that shift, and also backfilling. We have 2 other offices that are assigned here full time. Those shifts have to be backfilled by other personnel because, again, our shifts run at minimum staffing, and anytime someone takes a vacation day or a sick day, we're in an overtime situation. So those backfills also have to be provided through special funding sources. Hopefully, we will get this funding back and recouped from any stimulus package that is handed down to the state from the federal government. But right now, we're left to pay the bill.
That was my next question. Thank you.
Yeah,
Okay.
and just for the council, for the council's edification on that, our current understanding is that there will be a 75% reimbursement structure from the state, from the feds and the state for costs such as overtime. There's something to differentiate here, which is the overtime costs associated with those that are very explicitly staffing the EOC. Those appear to be certainly eligible for that. There's some clarity that we're seeking on, as the chief was pointing out, where shifts have to be moved around because now you have to pull folks off to staff the EOC. Can we still collect reimbursement on that additional cost? So we'll certainly submit, and we're tracking all of this and submit the greatest extent for what we can to get reimbursed for the town.
And just so people know, the EOC is staffed every day with 6 to 8 people that are answering phones, and they're in there working. And then there's in the situation room, there's the chiefs and Meredith who are working in the situation room. So you're talking about there's about 10 people a day that are staffing that EOC, and they need to be paid. So I'd like to hear a motion that we adopt this as an emergency motion.
So moved.
A motion has been made. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second. Okay, any discussion on the motion being passed as an emergency motion?
Yes, Council President?
Yes.
I have a couple of questions. Again, I think the town on a whole is doing an amazing job, and the EOC is definitely leading that effort. I do think that this should go to finance just to be vetted out. Just to comment on what Councilor Farino had said, if you look at on the details, I think we got this today, maybe we got it the other day, I think it was maybe yesterday, whatever it was, that adds up, if I'm reading it right, it adds up to about $39,000, but I know that can't be $39,000 in overtime because that's not what this sheet says above. And yeah, I'll let you answer. I'll just ask the two questions, Dana, and then if you can make a comment.
Ask the questions, then Anna can answer. I don't think it's all overtime. That's this.
And the professional services, I just have a question on, are we hiring people to help us make statements to the press? And how much is that costing us? So those are, I guess, the two questions I have.
Okay. On the overtime piece, I'll validate each of those with the chief. I pulled them off a tracking sheet we have, but I'll make sure that I didn't pull something in inadvertently on those. But also just note that the note there that's in the memo that the council received, not all of all the costs have hit the system yet. So where you're looking at a report directly from our accounting system, it doesn't take into account some of those costs that are on that sheet because they haven't been fully posted yet because of the timing. Payrolls run every other week, and so not everything is finalized in the system yet. And just a quick note about if the council chooses not to take it up as an emergency, we would be sending that appropriation into deficit, which is not allowed under our charter. We'd have to charge those costs off to the department and then make accounting entries at a later time. If the council chose not to appropriate the funds, then those departments would unfortunately have to eat those costs, and we may have deficits at the end of the year to clean up, just as a flag to note just some of our internal timing issues. And then on the communications piece, we do have a contract with a vendor who assists with crisis communications moments, as I understand it. Often the chief may be able to provide more clarity on that, but in terms of some initial upfront costs and getting up that the communications pieces that the town manager spoke about earlier, that the community has been relying on, we had some assistance in structuring that to make sure that those messages were as clear and effective as possible so that people could get the updates that they need.
Okay, any other questions? Hearing none, I would put the motion to make this an emergency to a roll call vote. Denise, would you take a roll call vote?
Yes. Council Ruggiero,
Yes.
Council Flockhart,
Yes.
Council DeMarco,
Yes.
Council Christopher,
Yes.
Council Honan,
Yes, sorry.
Council Farino,
Yes.
Council LeConte,
Yes.
Vice President Lettieri,
Jim, you gone?
okay. President Boncory,
Yes. Okay, motion carries to take it as an emergency motion. Now, on the motion for the $50,000, I would take another roll call, please.
Council Ruggiero,
Yes.
Council Flockhart,
Yes.
Council DeMarco,
Yes.
Council Christopher,
Yes.
Council Honan,
Yes.
Council Farino,
Yes.
Councilor Conti,
Yes.
Vice President Lettieri,
Can I just, and I apologize, my computer just died. I just got back on. What are we voting on?
On the $50,000, we already
The
passed it.
emergency motion?
No, we already
I'm not-
passed it as an emergency, 8-0 word here. But
Okay.
this is for the 50,000.
No, I have to vote no on it.
President Boncory,
Yes,
motion passes.
motion carries 8-1. Okay, under new business, there is another motion was brought forward by Councilor Honan. Councilor Honan, are you ready? You're muted again.
Yep, my apologies. I do not have the motion in front of me. Could somebody else read it?
I can read it. The motion by Councilor Honan is that the town manager request National Grid, Gas and Electric, Comcast, and the Massachusetts Water Resource Authority, MWRA, in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, to provide a discount all ratepayers in the town of Winthrop for the duration of the state emergency as declared by the governor of Massachusetts, Charlie Baker. So that is a request. We pass this motion directing the council manager to make that request of all utilities and so forth, just as it says, to give the Winthrop residents a discount. Is that correct? Did I read it correctly?
Yes, thank
Councilor
you.
Honan? Okay, that motion is by Councilor Honan. Is there a second to it?
Second.
Seconded.
Seconded by Councilor DeMarco. He was first. Okay, discussion. Councilor Honan. Under discussion, do you want to give me your reasoning?
Just that these are unprecedented times. People are struggling. People are out of work. And I'm aware that these discounts are being requested by other cities and towns. And I thought it would be wise to ask on behalf of Winthrop to try to award us these discounts as well.
Okay.
Okay. Motion has been made and second. Any other discussion? Austin, do you want to weigh in on it?
Nope. The message was received from Councilor Honan previously. I'm aware of what's happened in Revere and some other communities. Already tried to be in discussions with the MWRA concerning this topic. In terms of some of the other utilities, I'm going to try to reach out. And then Comcast is another item that, even though internet isn't a utility, it kind of falls within the same realm, and Comcast has offered some of the essential services and some services for their internet essential services and some of their other services for students in the community that need service at a discounted rate, and I've worked with the superintendent on that as well. So whatever way we can alleviate what people in town need to pay for some of the utilities, we're going to try to pursue and research.
Okay. Motion has been made and seconded, and any other discussion? Hearing none, the motion is to direct Austin Town Manager to request discounts from all of the above previously, National Grid, Gas and Electric, Comcast, and MWRA. Okay, everybody understand what we're voting on? Roll call vote, please. Denise, roll call. You're muted. You're muted.
Councilor Ruggiero,
Yes.
Councilor Flockhart,
Yes.
Councilor DeMarco,
Yes.
Councilor Christopher,
Yes.
Councilor Honan,
Yes.
Councilor Frino,
Yes.
Councilor Conti,
Yes.
Vice President Lettieri, President Boncory,
Yes.
motion passes.
Motion is carried. Okay, public comment. Do we have anyone waiting, Larissa?
Ew. Hi there, do you have public comment?
Hi, yes, I have a question actually.
Please identify yourself.
Colleen Murph, Precinct 2.
Hi, Colleen, how are you?
Good, how are you? I had sent a correspondence in a couple of weeks ago. I don't know if I did it the correct way because I didn't see it addressed on the last meeting. So I'm just curious. I walk Yarrow Beach every day because I feel I can really social distance there, and people are really great about it. But I've noticed that the barrier is open now, which says the beach is open. And I'm just wondering if we've thought about what we're going to do as the weather gets nicer. And I'm sure Councilman LeConte has been inundated by his constituents down Point Shirley. But is there any way that we could make the parking in front of Yarrow Beach for residents only that have parking stickers? Because I think that the town manager had a good point. There are a lot of people coming into the point to go to Deer Island. They can't park there. So what they're doing is they're parking at Yarrow Beach. And once the landing is open and the boats are all there, that parking's going to go away. So I'm just wondering, I know it's come up in the past, and we all have stickers. Is there a way we could make that just resident parking only?
This is Councilor Flockhart. I would like to point out that everybody in town does not have a sticker. Anybody who lives in an apartment building, such as Seal Harbor, who has their own off-site parking, doesn't have a sticker.
I have a driveway. I park in my driveway, but I have a sticker. You know, there are other communities that have beach stickers. I mean, there's a way to get around it because there's a lot of people coming into this town. And I don't know if you're aware of it. There's a lot of people coming in. In normal times, it's perfect. But right now, I'm afraid once the weather gets hotter and people start going to the beach.
Okay, thank you.
I don't know.
Colleen, we'll look into it. All I can tell you right now is that we will look into it. I had some conversations about parking at Yarrow Beach with Steve Keller a while ago, and we were trying to work on some kind of plan, but everything is in the works so far. So
Okay, all right, great, thank you. And I just want to say to Chief Delahunty, thank you to your offices and the fire department and the EOC for everything they do.
Okay, thank you, Colleen.
Thank you.
Hey, President Boncory, I do want to point out one thing.
Public comment. You'll have an opportunity.
Okay, all right.
Okay. Any other public comment?
Yes.
Hello, identify yourself, please.
Yes, my name is Kathleen Capuccio, 49 Waldemar Avenue.
Hi, Kathleen. How are you?
I'm good. How are you, Phil?
I'm great, honey.
First, I would like to just reiterate what everyone's saying. Meredith Hurley and, Chief Delahanty and Chief Flanagan and all of their colleagues for the amazing work that they're doing during this pandemic. I just want to say thank you so very much. That you're just really doing an incredible job. So truly, truly thank you. And then my question was with regard to the meeting held last week with VHB Engineering. And I believe all of our counselors were present, but then I heard that maybe one counselor wasn't present. And again, this was the meeting which was discussed briefly tonight with regard to the zoning of the old middle school. I was just wondering when the public would be when the public would have access to a transcript of the meeting or a recording of the meeting or some type of detailed minutes of the meeting.
Okay, either Councilor Honan or Christopher answer that. That was a joint committee meeting.
Minutes were submitted to Denise. Denise, could you tell us when those would be made public or could be made public?
Yep, those will be made public tomorrow morning after this meeting.
Okay, and they'll be on the website?
Yes, they will.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Tracy. Thank you, Denise.
Sure.
Yes, sir. That was it. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks for calling.
Bye-bye.
Anyone else, Larissa?
No, I don't see any others.
No other public comment? Last chance. Okay. Hearing none, does any counselor have any public relations they would like to talk about?
Yeah, I just wanted to say real quick, President Boncory, I had heard from Colleen, and she did send in some correspondence a week or two back, and she's been trying to get some correspondence in, and we haven't covered them during the correspondence portion of the town council meeting. And I've heard some complaints about that before. I mean, nothing we can do at this point right now, but I just wanted to make you aware of it and just make sure, we make sure that if anybody sends some correspondence in, that it gets heard during the meeting.
Yeah, we get a list of everyone that sends one in. I only get certain ones sent directly to me, but I guess council is getting some. Anyone else?
Council
Any
President.
other- Yes.
Just, I know we've had a lot of crazy things on our mind, but this is the year for the charter review. Have you been thinking about that?
Yes, I pretty much got everybody that I'd like to be on it. But anyone else that would like to be on the Charter Review Committee, please give me a call, let me know, fill out an application online. I have not made all the choices. I've got about half of it in my mind, and people who have requested it and people who I've already talked to about being on it. But if you are interested in being on it, please go on the town website, fill out an application and get it in as soon as possible, because I will probably be making these at the next meeting. I intended to make them at this meeting, but I was still, I think, 3 people that I have to talk to about possible conflicts. Okay.
Thank you.
But there are openings. Okay. No one is in stone yet. Anyone else? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion.
Second.
Okay, was that Council Farino made it and Council Terry seconded?
Sure.
Okay, motion. I just didn't catch the voice. Okay, all right. Please take a roll call vote.
Okay, Counselor Gillo,
Yes.
Counselor Flockhart,
Yes.
Counselor DeMarco,
Yes.
Counselor Christopher,
Yes.
Counselor Honan,
Yes.
Counselor Farino,
Yes.
Counselor Conti,
Yes.
Vice President Lettieri,
Absolutely.
President Boncory.
Yes.
We are
Motion
adjourned.
is adjourned. Thank you all very much
Thank you. Have
for
a good
being
night.
here and for what you do.
Thank you.